I don't know which one, what I will fish, but still, I need fish something because so many times I regret it. Oh my God, I should capture this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now you're the only one I'm doing this, okay? So I hope that's okay. I don't want to, expose your private, personal things too much, but I think this is for educational because so many people struggle how to deal with their own parents, especially holiday time. I think
It's the toughest time.
toughest time.
Yeah. It's a struggle for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I know a lot of friends that are struggling
Really?
during the holiday season, and
Uh-huh.
they have like estranged relationships with their family.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's where like the toughest. They express that it's the toughest time
Mm.
and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a lot of issues, right?
Mm.
It's a very difficult time.
Right.
A lot of people find sadness during the time of
Mm.
holidays.
Also, they want to avoid it, and they want to avoid interacting with them, right?
Right.
So, from the experience, I don't know, because the parents won't change. We know that.
Yeah.
It's so hard for them to change. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with the same parents that we have to deal with every holiday time?
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
So.
I mean, I still struggle with them too. I guess.
Uh-huh.
I mean, of course, I even argue with my parents
Yeah.
recently. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. It will not never end.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a matter of how you overcome it.
Mm.
It's the toughest thing to overcome. It's
Yeah.
like putting, like thinking of ways to make it. Like, okay, so I followed my parents again,
Mm-hmm.
and like, how can I come down from this anger I have that's like out of my brain,
Right.
But every time you argue with them, like,
Mm-hmm.
and you find that you express to them like the anger that you have, and of course there's the feeling of they're gonna fight back because they feel defensive,
Right.
and you feel attacked because you're attacking. It's like they feel like they're being blamed and like victimized too. And so I'm like, okay, well, that's where we have to find like a way to just decompress from the situation. I tell them, okay, I can't talk right now.
Right.
I can't. I'm gonna go away because I'm really angry right now,
Right.
and I'm gonna come back,
Mm.
and then we're gonna talk through this.
Okay.
Even if they don't want to talk through it,
Mm-hmm.
it's like my dad is the most like
Yeah.
he's the most closed off person in terms of like, oh, I don't want to. I don't want any. I'm not gonna talk about this. Like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. And he'll say it over and over again because he's shutting down. That's his defense mechanism.
Right.
It
seems like he's saying that he cannot handle it.
Yeah.
Within his capacity. Yeah.
That's just how he is. He's just he can't handle a lot of emotional things. It's like being emotionally unavailable to the fullest degree, and it's hard to deal with that also.
Say when you express your feeling right about whatever he does to you, so that means what, he cannot handle it.
Yeah, he can't handle it usually, but I did recently have like a moment where he was like, okay, so you're doing. So I guess it was reminiscing about the past with my mom.
Right.
We talk about like, oh, we used to do this all the time during the weekends because we never did anything else except for this one thing. And then he's like, oh, why do you always have to bring up like the things that are so depressing? Like why do you bring up like all the negative things from the past to my mom? I guess he was kind of like, I think at that moment he was blaming himself. He was kind of like being really hard on himself. I found it as like, oh, we're just remembering the past. Like I told him, so we were walking through the same neighborhood that I grew up in. So it's kind of like I had a moment where I was like, oh, I know the entire, like I know all the layout of the streets in this neighborhood. I used to wander alone here.
Really?
So I know every single corner of the street. Because I used to, I spent so much time alone.
How old were you?
Like
Elementary?
Yeah, elementary to like early elementary. Like probably even like 8, 9, 10. As early as I could ride my bike or rollerblade and stuff. So I ventured off whenever, and I would ride alone. And I told him that while I was driving the car, and he was in the car with my mom and stuff. And he was like, oh, well, I think he started to get kind of defensive from that point on, because I was like, yeah, these streets better than me too, because I traveled it alone more times than I could imagine back in the day. And then my mom was like, oh yeah, this is the street we used to take to go here to like the market, like to the shopping mall, because that's what we used to do all the time. It's just only that. And he was like, oh, why do you always have to bring back like the memory of like us not doing anything growing up and stuff, or us not taking her anywhere growing up and stuff. So she's like, oh, I didn't think of it as like a bad memory. I wasn't trying to bring it up as like it's a bad memory. And then my dad got very upset, and he was kind of closed off from that point. I already knew. See, I think as I can tell when people are upset now, and what makes them upset. I can already catch it the moment. I know, and I think that in that moment he's like, I want to say he was blaming himself for it. He felt bad, I think, because he knows what the past is, and me telling him and my mom everything like that, like it's like they start to feel guilty, and I think that's what he's feeling.
Was it the time that were you living with your grandparents or just by yourself?
It was when we were commuting back and forth.
Oh
with
yeah.
Grandparents.
But that particular place is of your
My parents' house.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that like going back and forth from like grandparents' house to my parents' house, like that's where we would spend like the weekends, or or sometimes after, like I would go home with them or something like that. It's like it depends on what they're feeling, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's very chaotic and it's very weird, and you don't know what's gonna happen day by day. Like where am I gonna stay with who?
Yeah.
And like and feeling going. It's just one of those memories where it doesn't, you don't have the best memories there, but also I'm trying to find at least some good memories that I have, at least to reclaim what I want to reclaim good memories and stuff. So I'm just trying to find like the positive memories now that I've been in therapy for a long time.
Yeah.
Since I know how to like help regulate my emotions and stuff now. So I'm trying to face it head on, like going back and seeing things and remembering things and stuff. So it's hard to look back, but at the same time, like you have to find some joy in what there was. I think that's great. I think that as I try to move on, I think my parents are stuck in the past of like regret and whatever. Because my dad does express some recently that he can't sleep at night all of a sudden.
Oh.
And I was like, well, he's never not been able to sleep at night.
Right.
So I think that it's very. I was like, oh, what's upsetting you? Like, what's going on? Like, why? Is there something on your mind? And he was just like, no, that's like he wasn't even gonna, bring up what's going on. He was like, no, I just can't sleep all of a sudden. Like that's strange because there's of course something on your mind that you can't sleep.
Yeah.
I think he's just like, no, I just can't sleep all of a sudden. And I think he's just like saying that's the old age or whatever.
I wonder if the same thing, like a lot of people getting old and maybe past senior, the retirement, and start having all this subconscious stuff that never been dealt with, may come up again. Because I was working with a lot of elderly clients, in the elderly center, and so I saw many, especially Korean elderly, right? They have the same issue, insomnia, and they're all tied to early childhood trauma, same way. Yeah, I heard about people saying about in Korean War, they're escaping from the city and then saw like dead bodies all over the place, floating around the Han River, things like that. Yeah.
It's so traumatic. I can imagine. I think that's where I'm trying to like, connect my, of course everyone has their own trauma that they're going through. So as I'm trying to understand, keep an open mind of understanding now that I've worked on the anger of what is the source of my anger. And then having worked through that, now I think that I can finally see, like, I can see the other side of it, you know, like now I can start to feel bad for people because I have emotional capacity to and healing past the anger to like see what other people are struggling with.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, okay, so like everyone has been traumatized at some point in time, and like you know they have to compartmentalize their brain in order to survive. You know? And so I'm like, and so I've just been really trying to think about like the way he survived growing up and trying to hear from his stories and trying to have him explain things and why he's so rushed all the time. Like where he's like, oh, we have to hurry up and do this. Like hurry up and hurry up and
like
do this.
Korean bali, you know.
Yeah, but also coming from I think where he comes from is that he like his trauma like of having to escape something during the war period. Like I think where he heard his mom say like, oh, hurry up and come here or hurry up and do
What
this.
year was he born?
He was 48. 1948.
Wow.
So like the Korean War was just about to start.
Oh my god.
Like he actually like lived
exactly
like the start of Korean War.
Do you know where his hometown?
It's Suwon.
Okay, so definitely she had to leave.
Oh, he had to leave.
Yeah.
But the thing is that he told me, I don't know how much of it he remembers or if it's his mom telling him, but he said that during that the period of time, like where we had to leave,
right?
Like all his mom, his dad was dead by that point, and he was 3.
Oh my god.
So he like had his mom and his brothers had to leave, and they left him behind with his grandma. So I think that there was like a lot of period of time where he just didn't know when they were going to come back.
Exactly. Wow, that's abandonment right there.
Exactly.
Wow.
So he has like
so what month was he born? 1948. What month?
Like November or October or November.
Okay, so you know, October, November 1988. 48 means what? When the Korean War broke out, he was 1 year and you know maybe about
A few months.
yeah. So yeah, he was let me see, like 8 months. Okay. 1 year 8 months. So 18 months is yeah. So like a 20-month-old. So 1.5 year.
Yeah.
Wow, very young. Yeah.
It's a lot of. I mean, he's like the child of war. This beginning of the war. Like it's so intense. And I don't think that I ever processed that for him. Like I never processed that. He never processed that. I never even thought about it as like, oh, he's struggled a lot in his life. But I never even thought about that until like I got past my own issues and like dealing with your own self. Sometimes you're selfish because you're trying to deal with your own issues, and so you feel like your problems are the only ones that are like that matter right now because they're suffering. They put that suffering on you, so you can't even care about what they went through. So that's like at that point you're just angry at them. But then when you process that anger and you get past whatever anger you have towards them, you can finally see from their perspective, right? And hearing their story and like being like, okay, so you experienced a lot of trauma growing up and making them feel like they've went through something, but but if you're very careful about it and you're not you're very careful with how you approach their trauma, they're very receptive to like, oh yeah, I did struggle. It's not like it's not putting a word on, not calling them, oh, you're just you went through, because sometimes trauma can be a scary word for people. So I guess you could just even calling them a victim, they're like some people don't like being called victims either. So it's like, oh, you went through a lot. Like you were actually like you struggled a lot in life, and I feel sorry that you went through so much hardship and stuff. And kind of like having that understanding for them and showing them that you understand that is almost like, I think it opens up like a door for them to be like, oh yeah, like I did go through something.
Right. Finally admit it.
Yeah. Or also, if you see it for them, like they almost like feel safe enough to let their guard down of like, oh, I did struggle. Because in your mind, you're like, oh, I'm not, like I'm resilient. Like I don't have any issues, and like I'm a strong person, and I didn't suffer, and it's like almost kind of having that much, like a filter on your life, right? You're like, oh, other people are worse off than I am. I'm not that bad. Like compared to people who did this, like I'm not at that level of, you know. So I guess like I'm not at their level of traumatized or whatever.
Right.
Like my issues are smaller. It's like diminishing, like making your issues smaller, so that other people, so you don't feel like, you know, you could create distance between them. They're suffering.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, they're the one that's traumatized. I'm not. Like it's like that approach at first.
Yeah.
I think that's what they have initially. So I think that being like, okay, it's okay. We all have trauma.
Yeah.
So like it's fine. Like that's not a scary thing when you finally get to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like it's almost freeing the moment you're like, oh yeah, I am traumatized, but that doesn't make you weaker than anything else.
Actually, you can become stronger too.
Right.
Through the wound, right? You know, overcome that pain. So I believe that I always believe that, you know, human civilization, okay, so thanks to those people with trauma. So you know, a lot of people, I research on like some scientists like Einstein or Newton. You know, I actually was interested in that, how they became like that, you know, and breakthrough, okay, achieve breakthrough, right? I was curious about that. What would motivate them, right? And I looked up. Wow, voila, yeah, they had trauma. That's why. See? So in that sense, you're right. Yep.
So it's like a, you know, getting to that early trauma, or getting to that source of trauma, or like the moment you keep working on that, it's like I feel like this is going to be a life journey, but it's about how much, you know, like every time you work on it, the less intense it gets.
Right.
So I think that it's so much easier now for me to like, oh, I get angry at my parents, like I'm probably angry for that day or and a half, and then I'm over it. Like it used to take me like weeks to get over it.
Yeah.
Like I used to fight with them and ignore them and do the same.
So like when you fight, for example, they will use the same weapon, whatever thing that hurt you when you're young.
Me, yeah.
Right, same pattern, same hurtful thing.
They do. Same thing.
How do you handle that?
I think it's tough.
I know.
But then I have to fight back and be like, are you trying to hurt me right now? Because it's working.
Oh wow!
I did that.
Really?
I did that to my dad. I was like, are you trying to purposefully hurt my feelings? Because it really is working.
Oh wow!
Like it's like, I think that's how I approached it. Like the first time of course he was just like, he just didn't know what to say after that. Like, how do you come back from that? So at first he was like, oh, okay, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Like that's his defense mechanism kicking in when I'm like, okay, you're just trying to.
You don't say that yourself, like, hey, you know, I don't want to deal with the way of you handling, attacking me this way or same way, and then I'll stop. Is that you?
I try to get through the conflict.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Like we're having an issue. I'm like, okay, we're fighting right now. Like I need to like resolve this, or else like you're not moving past it.
Wow.
Because usually we ignored it growing up, right? You ignore it. You're just passive aggressive the entire time. Like doors are shutting and you're yelling and you don't speak about it ever, and then you move on, and all of a sudden you're like, you just don't have issues anymore kind of family.
Right.
But I was like, no, I think in order for me to move on, like sometimes I will resort to like my old ways of like, I'll go into my room, right? And then I like take a second. That's your old way. Yeah, I would just like close the door and like go in my room and ignore the problem, right? It's like anger is like festering inside. Yep. It's like you're so angry, you're like, ugh, like you could scream. And then like internally now I'm like, oh, I have to like work on this.
Oh wow.
Now I have, the more I confront them.
How did you come up with that kind of determination that I need to work on it? Yeah.
That's true. Like it came from somewhere of like, I think the desire to like work on this relationship. Like I think it comes from like the desire to make it work, right?
Okay.
Like
Why do you have to make it work? Can't you just forget him? Maybe I want to disconnect the relationship and why?
It's like a repeated cycle and pattern of dysfunction.
Right.
Like though you can't avoid the issue forever. It's internal.
You can totally cut off.
Yeah, you could cut off, but it just transfers.
But were you thinking of cutting off in the past though?
Of course
You did?
Yeah. And so I think that everyone thinks of cutting off.
Right.
It's the easiest source, right?
Very good point. Wow.
It's super easy to just cut people out.
Yes.
Like I think that we do that all the time. Like it's like you're just avoidant. You just cut people out.
Right.
Like I think it's like you think that you cut the problem by cutting people out. But I realized the moment I did that with my parents, I cut my friends out the same way.
Right.
You find someone that reminds you of your parents, like you cut out your friends like that. You keep cutting ties with people, and then you're like, at a certain point, you think everyone else is the problem.
Right.
Right. You're like, oh, they're the problem, and that's why I cut them out of my life.
Yes.
Right. But at a certain point, I'm like, I think I came into like cutting out enough people in my life where I was like, oh, maybe I'm actually the problem.
Really?
Like I think I came to that later on when like you cut enough people out and you have a lot of issues going on and you realize that there's a lot of internalized things that you're upset about and you're like, why am I isolated from society? There's like a sense of isolation.
What about you only include the people who won't hurt you this way, but cut off all those people who hurt you, like your parents who hurt you like that?
Then I think you always find issues anywhere.
Really?
I think that I could find people who I get along with, but unresolved issues always come out.
Oh wow!
Like you get triggered by something, and then you start to yell at them the same way.
Oh.
You're like, why am I angry at you all of a sudden? And I'm like slamming my door the same way I did at home.
Wow.
Like it's the same exact thing. When I lived with my past, roommates to past friends that I had, anyone that had enough trauma that wasn't worked out like me.
Right.
Like we both had the same amount of trauma. We're both feeling defensive. We're both feeling attacked.
I see.
So we both resort to our form of self-defense. Because that's how we defend ourselves from early trauma.
So cutting off is your self-defense kind of thing?
I guess so, yeah. Avoidance.
Avoidance.
Mine is avoidance, yeah.
What if it's so toxic? This person is continue to hurt your feeling because, for example, like maybe your parents are used to compare with you or other people like that. You attack you, that person will attack you. Same way comparing with you. Okay, what about what's wrong with you? Look at your brother or sister doing. Then how are you gonna deal with that?
I mean that back then I would have just gotten super angry. I would have probably yelled at them like, who do you think you are? Like yelling, but also internally shocked that someone is attacking me the same way.
The same way in the past, that I've been doing it all the time.
Right.
Doing the same thing.
Right.
Then how are you gonna handle that?
I definitely was rageful at a certain point.
Yeah.
I think at a certain point when I would just get into fights with everyone on the street. Like anyone I came into contact with.
Right.
I just got into I yelled at them so loud. I think it's like a way of I couldn't yell at my parents, but I could yell at other people.
Oh.
So I started to yell at other very worked up. And so I you yell at other people, you ragefully, you could almost hit people. This is where the violence could come in,
Yeah, that's a good
it's
point.
So dangerous.
Yeah, I think the violence may be from there.
Yeah.
Suppress the one.
Suppressed enough. You suppress your emotions enough, and it will show up.
Exactly.
And manifest in ways of a dangerous way. And I think that having to suppress so much emotions growing up and not being able to cry or not being able to talk back to your parents, there's a lot of things where you suppress so much emotions that you just start to be so as I remember you called it people react externally, but I imploded, not exploded. I think I imploded. Because I was so depressed.
Right.
Like I was just so like over life by that point. Like I was, you know,
So
struggling so
I'm
much.
curious about, maybe the person usually hurt you this way and would not allow you to talk back, would not allow you to express your feeling and just constantly just talking to you, you're wrong, you're hurting me, or maybe you're blaming me, or things like that. How are you going to handle that?
I think now it's different than how I would before.
I see.
But I mean, sometimes I still revert back to like the old ways. Like those are hard to break sometimes. To keep working on it.
Right.
Habits, only break if you keep working on the habit. So I back then I would feel so like scared, right? Are you gonna hit me? Like what's the reaction?
Wow, really?
Since I got hit, I was like
even feeling that way because you got hit, and then
yeah.
you
So
feel like
I don't put my hands up. I emotional like I don't. I know they're not gonna hit me, but I feel scared the same way that I would get hit by speaking back. So I think there's like a moment where I would just stop talking. Because just being silent, I wouldn't get hit. So I think I would just like stop the conversation, and so that's how I would. How I would react. So I do tend to get a little bit scared of people because of stuff like that. Even at work, sometimes like a boss will remind me of my like the authoritarian kind of boss that yells at you and whatever. Now I'm like, oh, they're just super childish and they don't know how to regulate their emotions the same way. So now I can tell myself methods of formulate in my mind a way to be like, oh, they're just being immature. They're just a child, and they don't know how to properly regulate their emotions, and that's why they're they're yelling like that. I feel like that's embarrassing. For them. Now I could say that. Instead of being like, oh, okay, now I couldn't see that before. Right? Like I didn't know that them yelling at me or them doing these things that they're like they lack confidence in themselves, and so they're yelling at you because they need
it's their
to
problem,
compensate.
not yours.
It's like they're compensating for something that they don't have. So they feel like they need to like use their loud voice to make it so that they're bigger than you. Like actually show that they're bigger by yelling, but they feel like small inside, and they don't know. They have some form of insecurity that they're trying to like act like they don't have, by being like a big person. So I think that like the scare tactic is such a outplayed tactic. Everyone tries to scare you to do something for them, and then you realize you're like, oh. I'm embarrassed for you. Like I don't know how they're not embarrassed by like I feel embarrassed for them almost, It's like they're just so they're hurt themselves and they're immature and they
I mean, I wonder if they could also use those scare tactics not to intentionally use it, but somehow maybe grew up with it, maybe maybe have the conditioning kind of thing. So they thought that maybe unless I yell at you or hit you, you're not gonna listen to me, right? So in that situation, it's tough, right? So even then, that person's problem, with the difficulty communicating without hitting or raising voice, right? Yelling. So I guess what you're saying is right. It's the other person's problem. So if there's an immediate danger, definitely you can avoid. But if it's not dangerous, then you just wait. Okay, I can see you're yelling because you thought that I was not going to listen to you, and even then, I guess you can just respond in a way that like a role model. I think you can just calm me. But the person maybe feel that that communication cannot be reached without
yelling. I think that they definitely learn that it's like you have to use your voice or you have
the fact that you actually end up going back to your home, right, to the lion's den. Okay, I don't know how you overcame the fear and overcame the original way of dealing with it, right? That could be so helpful because so many people are struggling with it. Like you said, you're cutting off the relationship is such an easy way. You say, I didn't see it that way. I thought that was a difficult thing to do. But what you're saying is cutting off the person who hurt you is easier.
It's almost feels like that's in terms of thinking, you're like, oh, I have to survive, right?
Right.
So like, in order for me to survive, I have to just cut out the toxic part.
I see.
And you thinking that cutting out the toxic stuff
Uh-huh.
is just your parents,
Right.
right? You don't even think about you as the toxic person as well.
Wow.
Like, that's something I just connected
Really?
with my own life.
So when you cut off, still you have
You
toxic.
still have toxins inside of you.
Really?
Well, we call it toxins, but you still carry the same amount of, like, their teachings. You have their, like, inflictions of their pain on you.
Right.
They, whatever they inflicted, the pain that they carry, the words, like, everything we carry, like our insecurities, our, like, issues with our body, like, you know, whatever we have, right? Like, our disorder or whatever.
Right.
Like, depressed state or anxiety. Like, it's all still within us when we leave the house, right? And so the moment I like thought about it, or the moment I talked to my friends about it, anyone that's estranged with their family, they're always searching for a sense of family still.
Oh, I
like
see.
they still need that sense of connection with someone.
Yeah, but the toxin that you don't want to be connected with toxin though, right?
Yeah, but that's something that I realize I still carry inside.
Even though you cut off.
Yeah, like I'm still hearing things that trigger me sometimes when someone talks to me about, you know, they mention certain things and I get traumatized again.
I see. Wow.
But it's not, I don't know why they're doing it. Now I know why they're doing it. Like, I know, I'm sorry, I don't know why. I know why I'm getting traumatized from this experience, right? Like, someone's saying something to me and I feel traumatized or triggered by what they're saying. And now I'm not like, now I know, oh, that's just because my parents used to say that to me. But back then, I thought the person in front of me was attacking me.
Oh.
Because that's how I felt. Like, I'm like, why are you saying these things that are hurtful, right? But to other people, that those words might not be hurtful the same way, right? Like, there's certain words where I will feel defensive by it, but other people won't, because that's not how their parents hurt them, you know? So I think me thinking like, oh, they're just saying mean things, like, to me. Right. But sometimes people don't get affected by that the same way. Oh. So I was like, oh, okay. I come, like, realizing now and getting help and help from our conversations. Like, I think that it's something that I had realized, you know? Like, okay, now I carry so much, like, issues too, you know? The way I cope with certain things, the way I'm avoidant like them, you know, it affected my relationships around me too. Like, with my friends, with them at work.
Coworkers too?
Yeah, coworkers too, and how I would get, they're like, oh, why is she so upset all of a sudden? And I wouldn't tell them, okay, this is why I'm upset. Because I didn't know that I could do that. Right. Like, that wasn't an option for me to tell them, you're upsetting me right now because you did this. Like, I didn't even know why I was upset. Okay. I knew back then I just knew I was upset and angry. Right. And I didn't know what the source of that was, really. Because you don't think about that. Right. And so that wasn't something that I pinpointed as like, oh, this came from what my parents used to say to me. That this is how I was raised, and this is the hurt that they put onto me, and that's why I'm angry at what's happening right now. Okay. But the thing is, you don't know that if you don't do the proper work of internalized healing. You know? So I think that comes with a lot of like conversations like this, a lot of, you know, with a lot of awareness of what's going on.
So your case is like your work for the past, or this kind of conversation that kind of help you gather courage and strength to see it from an objective perspective, and then even there to go back and work on it, even with those impossible parents, until won't change, even though they still hurt you, same way. Right? So how did you do that? I mean, that's the thing that we were talking about here.
You need to help me along the way.
Yeah.
That's how I was able to get through it. It's like you guiding me through the experience of.
So I wonder if you remember that, maybe you said that, no, I can never do that. I will not go there. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know how you remember that I included you with that. You can do it.
Yeah. I think you're like, oh, we're going to work on this together.
Okay.
And we're going to get through this.
You're not alone, okay?
Yeah.
You're going to walk together when you deal with it. In the long run, this will be the way you will be free.
Right.
Because if you just cut off, that doesn't mean you're free yet. Right? Do you agree?
Yeah.
Do you see that way?
Yeah. And just cutting people off only is a solution that's temporary, right?
Oh, okay.
Just for that moment of comfort, and then you realize you live life and you find people in your life, and you start to. It's the same pattern again, right? You could find the next person that's your friend, or that's the next person that's your relationship, and like still cut them out the same way if they remind you of the person that your parents are or how you were raised.
Right.
And if it's any resemblance or any moment you realize that, you're uncomfortable, then you just cut people out. And it's like a defense mechanism. It's a way you survive.
Yeah.
Like something's attacking you, you need to get it out of your life kind of thing. And realizing that you are also hurting people along the way. Like I think that's where I'm like,
I wonder how you can explain that. How you hurt other people though along the way.
By not explaining to them why you're doing certain things. I wasn't telling them like, I just used to just cut people out. Like I didn't used to explain them. So I think that it's kind of like, for your sake of survival, you kind of hurt people along the way. That you lose friendships, you lose people, you lose relationships with people. So you can survive is what you're thinking. And so I think that you forget that you might even be inflicting the same amount of trauma that your parents did onto other people.
Wow.
That's
powerful statement there. I think somehow realization you had. Such a humbling thing. I mean, I thought that you were gonna say that. You know what? I'm the victim. Okay. My parents hurt me, and I'm still, struggling with it. And how can you not have sympathy for me, empathy for me? And what you're saying is, you could easily inflict pain on other people.
I see that now, yeah.
Really?
I mean, with enough introspective work, of course you will see that now. You work on, like how we worked on early on, like through step by step, right? We get through the anger process, and then we feel like we accept that we're the victim, and we you were like, okay, I am a victim of this, and this is mourning that loss. That was what we did, right? Like mourning the fact that we are victims, like just crying it out, like whatever you need to do, to realize that you are a victim of childhood trauma, of like abuse and whatever, and just feel bad for yourself. Like you have to feel bad for yourself, and allow that to be okay. That's what I think is like the step moving forward, is the fact that you can embrace that inner child that you is hurt, and then you can keep working on top of that through like constant, it's like everyday work. It's never gonna stop.
But it's amazing how you came up with that kind of insight that the pain you got from the perpetrator, right, whoever you call it, they become internalized into you, and you could be also a perpetrator. That's what you're saying. Wow.
You can be a perpetrator too.
Wow. I guess that's the way we have generational trauma. Okay.
It's like I have so much pain, and I feel like that's almost. I connect a lot of dots here, but I'm trying to be like, is that why people abandon other people?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like
or abuse same way.
Yeah. Because they're so angry
Exactly.
inside that they don't feel anything if they hit people. Because they're still so angry.
Or what about the neglect,
Right. Neglecting people, like, not texting people back when they're worried about you.
Right.
Calling someone back that cares about you.
Right.
If there's a friend that you have, you're like, oh, I'm too angry and depressed to even care about you right now.
Right. Yeah.
It's like there's so much internalized like it's so toxic inside of yourself that it's almost, you know, you start to neglect everyone else because you're trying to focus on your own survival.
Wow.
And I think that's why I think it's so important to work on yourself. I think that's where I had my realization of like, oh, I actually might be the toxic one.
Oh, wow.
That's, you know, it's so hard. It's so crazy.
How can
it's
you
really
even
hard
accept
to
that?
see.
Wow.
Exactly. I mean, it comes with a lot of introspective work, right? And then I think that's just with work from coming here and being like, okay, so I am a victim of abuse and trauma, but that doesn't make me like that experience just makes me invaluable, right? Like I now know things that are so helpful to help other people.
How did it help you dealing with your coworkers and everyone else right now after that realization?
It helps me to be more kind to people who are going through stuff. You know, because having been in their shoes of being angry or being irritated or any form of, you know, I see a sense of pain behind them. Now I see it as pain, right? Back then I was like, oh, why are they being so annoying? Like, why are they being so rude? They're being so like terrible, and they're being so disrespectful to me and everyone else, and they're yelling at how they're attacking all of us, right? You think that they're attacking all of us, but then you're like, you now see it from you've done some work, you know, you've done some introspective work on yourself, and you realize that you're a victim, that there might also be a victim too, and you kind of link the same things together, like the same. You're like, oh wait, that person was angry just like I was angry, so you're starting to see similarities here and there, right? You're like, oh, they lash out irrationally when you attack them, or you say certain things that makes them upset, or you know, there's certain situations that you keep catching similarities with your situation that you're like, oh, okay, so I guess, oh, okay, so we are similar. They're going through something right now that they haven't worked out. You know, they haven't worked on their trauma probably. If they're not talking openly about trauma, you know what I mean? You know, if they're not telling me that they work on themselves, then I'm like, oh, they probably never done the work before. So I'm trying to be more understanding, because having been someone that's like, oh, I'm never going to therapy, like I now understand that they're probably feeling that too. So I feel like since I have emotional capacity now that I worked on myself and worked through my anger, worked through my, you know, my sadness of like, let the mourning happen for my own sake and feel bad about myself. You know, feel bad for myself, for my inner child. Like having done that work and continue to do that work, but you know, having done it initially, I can see now the struggle someone else is going through. Like it's like I try to be like, okay, if I were in their shoes, what am I feeling right now? Like what would I want someone to say to me if they're struggling like this? So I try to be, I now approach conversations a little bit more, you know, respectfully, instead of being like, oh, you're so mean and rude right now. Like, of course, that's what we all want to say, right? We're like, okay, stop being so rude. Like, that only makes it seem like, in a receiving end, right? If you're the one receiving that, be like, okay, they're calling me rude right now, but I'm so upset by what happened to me. Like, can't you say I'm the victim here? Is what you're thinking.